Yo, yo, what's up, my people? Yes, it's time for another episode of 30 Years Ago, this month. That's right, this is the 8th episode of 30 Years Ago this month, which means we must be in the month of August. And as usual, I'm going to be going through and talking about all the cool shit that happened entertainment-wise that I care to talk about in this month 30 years ago in 1992. If this is your first time joining, yes, I've done January all the way until now, and I don't feel like stopping anytime soon, so jump on board and stay with me. For those of you who've been here for the whole time, you guys are the shit. But let's talk about the shit that happened in August of 1992. Not a lot to talk about in the world of music news for August, at least not in my world anyway, but one pretty significant thing happened on August 8th of 1992. Metallica were playing a concert in Montreal, Canada, when there was a pyrotechnics accident. A lot of you probably know all about this, but those of you who don't know, there are pyrotechnics during Metallica's show, which usually means like big flames or explosions or whatever. There was an issue, and I think what they chalked it up to was James Hetfield was not in the correct place on the stage. One of these pyrotechnics went off and burned the fuck out of him. They had to stop the show and rush him to the hospital. And several shows after that, his arms were so badly burned he couldn't play guitar. He just sang while there was somebody else playing guitar back in the wings. You know, that was a big enough incident, and that would have been bad enough. But this was during the tour when Metallica was touring with Guns N' Roses. And Guns N' Roses were scheduled to go on after Metallica that night. And then Guns N' Roses, as usual, come on late. And then apparently what ended up happening was very shortly within the set, Axl Rose started complaining about having problems with his throat. And then he ended up walking off the stage and ending the show early as well. So 2 shows got abruptly ended. The difference was the Metallica show, there was an accident and the dudes came out and apologized and said they'd be back. Guns N' Roses, they just fucked off. And so the crowd, they weren't too happy with that. And so that caused there to be a riot within the arena and outside of the arena. You can see footage of it online where people are trashing stuff and even turning over a police car. I mean, it got fucking crazy. I thought everyone was like supposed to be so nice and calm and mild-mannered in Canada, but I don't know. Axl Rose just brings that out in people, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that was an incident that it kind of lives on as one of those things in metal history. It's like, remember that fucking show where James caught on fire and then everybody rioted? So that happened in August of 1992. Now let's move over to the music charts for August of 1992. The number 1 album in America for August of 1992, once again, Some Gave All by Billy Ray Cyrus. Look, guys, we only have to get through one more month and then things will start looking better. On the singles charts for the first week of August, it was a number 1 the month before, the classic hip-hop single Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot. That was just for the first month, though. Apparently people were all like, look, we like these big booties and all, but, let's move on to something else. And I'm like, why? And so everyone moved on to something very different. The number 1 song for the second week of August was the song This Used to Be My Playground by Madonna. A softer and non-booty related, I guess if it's Madonna, there's always some level of booty involved. But it was a song that was featured in the movie A League of Their Own, and a pretty good song, but it only stayed on top for 1 week. Because on the third week, coming in as the number 1 song, and then dominating most of the rest of the year as the number 1 song in America, we have the classic R&B song End of the Road by Boyz II Men. Now look, I'm only going to say this once. If you don't like this song, you are beyond help. It is literally every song that, there's some R&B songs that come on and I'm like, this is fine. But then there are other ones I'm like, just fucking stop everything. Fucking End of the Road is on right now. But if you guys listened to the most recent episode of Cranked and Ranked, you all learned that I have a soft spot for late 80s, early 90s R&B. So there you go. Now let's move over to movies. For the first week of August, the number one movie in America was a movie called Death Becomes Her, which stars Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn and Bruce Willis. And that is all I remember about that movie. I'm pretty sure that I saw it. In fact, I kind of remember there being a build up to it because there was supposed to be like cool special effects in it or whatever. But it is a movie that came out and I have even the name comes up and I had no desire to like delve back into it to find out what it was all about. I'm just like, I'm fine. And then for the rest of the month of August, the number one movie in America was the movie called Unforgiven, which was like written, produced, directed, starring Clint Eastwood. Maybe he didn't write it, I don't know. But it was his baby, and it fucking won Best Picture, Best Director, Academy Awards, and it was a big deal. I don't remember this movie either, to be completely honest. I'm also not very interested in going back and revisiting it. I'm sure it's great, but you know, it wasn't what I was looking for when I was 14 years old. Like neither one of these movies, Death Becomes Her and Unforgiven, 14-year-old Steven was like, yeah, I'm not gonna go see those movies. I'll be doing something else. But now let's move on to the reason we're all here, the most important part of every episode, the albums that were released 30 years ago this month. Now for this first one, it's a very special album to me. It's a way, way, way lesser known, was that even correct English, album. And I couldn't find a clear release date for which day it came out. I saw something somewhere saying it came out on August 1st, but I feel like that's a default. Like it was in August, let's just throw it in the 1st. But I love this album. Gray Matter, the album is called Thog. Now, don't let the album cover fool you. This is not metal, which is probably why I've always liked it, because even the logo, everything about this makes it seem like this is going to be a metal album. But this is not. This is on Discord Records, and this is much more in the melodic hardcore area. If you're fans of things like Fugazi and Discord related music, once they you know were moving towards that area, this is probably right up your alley. So Gray Matter was a band that was around in the 80s, put out an album in the 80s and then broke up, and then they got back together in 1990 and put out this album. And this to me is the best thing that they ever did. The songwriting on this album is fucking great. The performances are great. It's one of those albums that just me calling it melodic hardcore doesn't really do it any justice. You'll have to like check it out for yourself. But it is one of my favorite albums of the early 90s, and it's easily one of the most underrated albums and bands that I can think of, because both of the full-length albums they put out are fucking great, but this one is fucking awesome. On August 4th, the third album from Faster Pussycat was released, which is called Whipped. It's got an exclamation point. This is the last of what would be considered the classic, well, I consider the classic Faster Pussycat albums. I think that aside from the drummer, it's the same lineup from the first and second album. And I really like this album, and I really like, honestly, when it comes to like the sort of sleaze rock kind of thing that Faster Pussycat were doing, they had a really great 3-album trajectory where you can clearly see a progression in what they were doing. It all still sounds like Faster Pussycat, but I think in this one they had matured quite a bit, and musically had gotten better at playing in general. You listen to that first album, it's a little bit, some of it's a little iffy, but yeah, Whipped is a really great album, and I guess the version of Faster Pussycat that's around now, I think they've only put out one actual album of original music ever since then. So, but yeah, end of the original era of Faster Pussycat. And honestly, I miss it. I miss those dudes because they were a great band. Moving on to August 17th, another album that to me is the ending of a classic era, the 5th album from Exodus, Force of Habit. This is a polarizing album. I say polarizing. Most people say they don't like it. I think even the band members say they don't like it. It is one of my favorite Exodus albums. And but if you know anything about me from watching my channel, when bands hone in what they're doing and slow it down and actually give the song some room to breathe, usually to me they make better albums. I wouldn't say this is my favorite Exodus album. That's hard to say, but it's maybe my second favorite. It's got all sorts of great songs on it. To be completely honest, the hate that it gets just because they slowed down a little bit is ridiculous because it's still really heavy, and it's still the same. It's the same sound. I don't know. It's not like Steve Souza all of a sudden starts singing all the time. There's some singing on it, but you know what I mean? He still sounds like himself for the majority of the time. Anyway, Force of Habit to me, great album, and it would be, I think, another 10 years before they put out another album, and I think at that point the lineup, I think it already changed. But End of an Era, great album, Force of Habit. Let's move on. On August 25th, a very important debut album came out, Soul of a New Machine from Fear Factory. I remember hearing this album, and I think I did not hear this until 1993, but when I did, I just remember it being one of those albums that I just couldn't stop listening to because it was a sound where it had a lot of elements where I go, I don't think I've heard this combination of things before, because it had parts of it that I guess could be connected to industrial, parts that could be connected to what I guess would be called grindcore, and I'm pretty sure it was the first time I ever heard death metal style lyrics and then clean singing. Which is what happens all the time now. But the thing that I love about Fear Factory is that Burton C. Bell, his singing is never like trying to be pretty. And it sounds, especially on this album, it sounds creepy. And I love that about this album. And also what I really love about Soul of a New Machine is the fact that there's an element of uncertainty where it's not all really smoothed out. There's rough edges to the there's abrupt tempo shifts, and it seems like they're still trying to get their head around like what they want to do and how they're going to do it. And I like that sort of chaotic, like who knows what the fuck could happen next kind of feeling. Whereas like as they would move on, their shit sounds so precise, it almost seems like you could just program it into a fucking computer. And then that would be it. But not on this album. And so I just think it's such a unique album, such an important album in extreme metal, and Fear Factory is a great band. So yeah, Soul of a New Machine. Last but not least, also on August 25th, the third album from Warrant, Dog Eat Dog. This has always been a very fascinating album to me because songwriting-wise, there's a lot of really good songs in this. Now, if you don't like Warrant and that kind of music, you're not going to like this. But for those of you who do, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say that like the songwriting seemed to have gotten better and the direction got a little bit more serious, which it makes sense because by the time they were recording Dog Eat Dog, Nirvana was already a thing that everybody was listening to. So it makes sense that Jani Lane and company were like, yeah, maybe let's tone it down a little bit. And it worked, honestly, for them. I think a lot of people think this is the best Warrant album. The first one's still my favorite, but Dog Eat Dog has some really good songs on it. And it's, it's kind of a bittersweet album for me because, yeah, they did do more Warrant albums, even with Jani, and now Jani's gone, and now there's a different singer playing with Warrant. But this particular album, it was like, to me, it like symbolizes the end of that era, like finally, because the story that Jani tells about walking into his record company and the wall that used to have Warrant on it now had Alice in Chains. And then soon after that, I don't know if they were dropped from their label or if their contract just ended or whatever. But that was kind of like the vibe of what was going on. It's like, the changing of the guard, the kind of music, that kind of music wasn't in fashion anymore. And to be fair, it had become oversaturated and that genre had pretty much killed itself off, and grunge just kind of nudged it off the cliff. But albums like this, Dog Eat Dog, where these bands, continue to show off that they're very talented people and they don't necessarily need to do these like poppy kind of things in order to get by. I don't know. I love it. I'm talking a lot about an album that most people are like, why is he talking about Warrant? Well, because I don't know. They're a great band. Yeah, Dog Eat Dog, the last album I'm talking about for this episode of 30 Years Ago this month. So that's it. Another month down. Join me next month for all the shit that happened in September. I'm going to keep this shit going and until we hit a year where I go, I'm not really interested in the shit that came out that year. But I think we still have a couple years to go before I get there. So hopefully you guys are in it for the long haul, because, I'm going to be up here annoying everybody for a long time if I can. So yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of 30 Years Ago this month. I will see you all again next month.